This is the April 20th, 2024 production of Memories Night, Springtime, and our topic tonight is alumni of the former Guaymas Schoolhouse. It is to be hosted by Eric Veal and presented by Janice Veal and sponsored by the Guaymas Island Historical Society and Project.
How many people are you thinking are going to be here? This many. This many? That's our first guess. Yeah, I was in class. Did you kill any caterpillars today? Did you kill any caterpillars today? Kill caterpillars. What's that? Caterpillar. Did you kill? Oh, yeah, yeah. I think so. I told us.
Remember, also I brought some of the letters that the people wrote for the reunion.
I mean, you saw that guy like his body on fire.
The new historical society that is sponsoring this event, and I'll list off the officers. So Don is the president, Eric, vice president.
No.
Now, she get three different.
Everything, I'm a secretary.
Oh, you're the secretary. Who's the vice president?
Bill.
Bill. Maybe we should just do it this way. We'll just do the members. We don't have their positions. So there was an old historical society that, looking around the room, many of us were there for a number of years, right?
20 years.
20, yeah. Yeah, I think it was 2002 that we incorporated. And Bob was a founding member. And Wynn was involved in society, and he was the president. We had lots of different presidents. But Wynn, talk about a resource. I mean, Wynn was Mr. History. And he collected things, and we're not sure we know where all of them are. But also, you know, at our meetings, he would read various stories, and I mean, he was a wonderful resource. And unfortunately, Wynn passed away a few years ago. And Carol Beach, Carol's back here. Carol was a president too.
Before him.
Before Wynn?
No,
Before Tom. Oh, before Tom, okay. This is really confusing. So Carol was president for a while. I can't even remember how many different presidents we had. And then Carol's husband, Tom, was our last president. And Tom was just a go-getter. I mean, I think we had 4 dog shows that were wonderful events. And we have these other events to make money. I remember years ago, Jeff Gent would come to our meetings. He'd always come in late, and he was always disappointed because all we did was talk about how we could raise money. And he wanted to.
It wasn't true.
Yeah, I know. And he wanted to talk about historical things. So what we ended up doing is alternating meetings that we do historical things and then talk about how we're going to raise money.
We keep doing historical things.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, that group, after Tom died, there weren't very many members and we weren't sure what to do, so we disbanded and ended up turning our resources, our money and our CDs over to the library to hold until we got organized again, which which is what's happening with the new historical society. So there's some people I'd like to thank. Well, I never went through all the members on the committee. You guys don't care. Because I have them in the wrong order. So there's some people I'd like to thank. Morna, and I saw Morna come in. Thank you, Morna. Morna is involved in the library and really a great resource for our committee to have your help. So also, I'd like to thank Phil, who's on the committee, and Phil is vacationing. So yeah, don't you know we're going to have this event? But Phil's a great resource. He worked for Microsoft for. Oh, okay. Oh no. He worked for Microsoft a number of years and is our.
Siemens, actually.
Oh, Siemens. I thought you said Microsoft. Okay. Boy, got all my caps wrong. Phil is our resource as far as technical things. And I also want to thank Joseph Miller. I can't tell you how many times I've approached Joseph and said, we've got historical society, we have the scholarship. I mean, there's always something that I need Joseph, or we need Joseph's help. And this time we needed posters, and he comes up with it. So Joseph is a wonderful resource. So I left my notes at home, fortunately. So yeah, I think at this point I'll turn it over to Eric.
Okay.
So, yeah, how did I get looped into this? I think Dawn Ashback just kind of, well, I mean, it's been a mix, right? I think Dawn stopped by at some point and said, like, hey, I want you to join this group. And so I grew up on Guaymas. I was born in '77, so I'm 46 years old, and I live. There's a whistle in the room. Is that my fault, or do you guys hear that? Is that just me? Is that just how it is? Okay, so we'll celebrate that. But yeah, so I grew up here. I graduated from Ancortis High School. I went to Western. I went to Seattle. I lived there 20 some odd years, and moved back here just after the pandemic and lived in Grandma's house on West Beach. But she's since deceased, but I get to enjoy the property. But yeah, so Dawn originally kind of looped me into the group and said, it's kind of reforming, and again, the history that my mom shared there as far as like the group's been around, and people like Bob. I mean, the island history is fascinating. Am I like fourth generation? Something like that. I mean, like my great grandma lived here when I was a little kid, and I remember that. Anyway, so my family's been around since I think the 46, and then this topic is I don't know whose original idea was for just to remember the schoolhouse and the history of it and so forth, but that's what we're here to do tonight. And just the other night we went to an event in town, and it was about the Samish village. And the guy that facilitated it is Tom Wooten. And one thing that he did as a facilitator that I liked was just kind of like, we're all kind of here looking for this spark within ourselves of our own memories and trying to put together a story kind of collectively. But I guess without further ado, I'd like to step to the side here and just welcome our panelists. So we have Bud Ashback, who I've known for a long time, and then Clive Humble is my first time meeting tonight. But hi, Clive, how are you? And Steve Orsini, and Carol Deach, and my father, Glenn Peel. So these are the alums that are in the house from the old Guaymas Schoolhouse, and I think I'm going to pass the mic to each of them, and they can just give a brief, like 1 minute introduction of just who are you, just who are you. I think we'll just start with that.
I'll try to do it. There you go. Tell me if I'm not.
But you have to use the microphone.
I have to.
Yes.
Don't fall over. I'm Bud Ashback. I've been on the island since 1946, and here, I'll try to keep this brief. I went to the school in 1952. I was 2 months shy of 6 years old, and I was at that school up there until the spring of 1955. So I was telling Adam, you know, looking back at those 3 years, that's 72 years ago when it started, and I have a hard time trying to articulate what it was that I actually learned there. You know, Mrs. Miles was our teacher. I think, was that Laura Miles?
Vera Miles. Vera Miles.
Okay, Mrs. Miles came from Bellingham, and my parents, we went up there and we found out where she was in Bellingham, and she lived on the Guide Meridian, just south of the freeway, which is, and north of the freeway now is the shopping village up there. You have to go and goes up to Costco. Well, she was on the south side, she was on the south side closer to the city, and so we knew where she was from, and then she showed up on Weymouth, and like I said, I already knew how to read. My mother had taught me to read when I was about 4 years old, and it was Donald Duck comic books. I really kind of knew a little bit about it. So I didn't, like when we started at first grade, I remember the Dick and Jane books about C-Spot and Ron, and I thought that was all boring and not fun. Now, and I do recall that. I do recall on the blackboard, above the blackboard, there were black blocks up there with white lettering, and it was cursive. Like there was the A, the regular, and then the cursive. So the whole the whole alphabet was up there. I do recall that, and it, of course, I entered in 1962. But what I recall over by this was in the south room of there were two big rooms, the one to the north, and then the south was combined for all of the different grades that were there. And up by the door to the northwest of that south room, there was a picture of all of the presidents of the United States. And Eisenhower was in the middle. Now that had to be in my second year, but I don't recall that. But I just get, wow, that's one thing I do remember, that Eisenhower was real important for a second grade student. And getting back to the teacher, Mrs. Miles, what I recall most is from time to time she would be scolding me. Because, to the south of the school of Lennon, you guys remember this, there was an old woodshed out there. And previously the school had been heated with wood. I think by the time I got there, or soon after, it went to heating oil. But that shed was out there, and it was nice for when it was raining, because you could have recess and get out there or sneak out there. And what I recall is there was a swing in the middle of it, and for some reason, Mrs. Miles didn't like us going out there and swinging. Yeah, and Clive here, he was one of my best friends, along with Glenn's younger brother Arn, and then Kit Vonnegut. We were all the same age. And Clive was more well-behaved. He didn't go out there and hop on the swing. But Glenn or Arn and Kit Vonnegut and I used to, and she didn't like that. And after some time, well, that swing just disappeared. But there we were, youngsters, and for some reason the teacher didn't like us swinging out there. And anyway,
let's move on for now.
That's a great answer. Everybody's expected to provide a similar long.
I'm Clive Humble, and my family moved here in 1948. I was born in Seattle. My parents, or my father, actually they both did, worked at Boeing Aircraft during the war. into real estate, and that's how Lucas came into the picture. Became aware of the property, and they decided that it was time to get out of Seattle, and they moved up here. Bud remembers a lot more about the school than I do, but I enjoyed Mrs. Miles. She was a pleasant person to get along with. However, when I got to Anacortes, I ended up staying back a year because I had dyslexia, and I don't learn like normal people do, and so it kind of caught up with me there. And then after we were here a while, I know my father worked at the mill, and then he eventually became the manager of Copeland Lumber in Anacortes. And I was just telling some of the other people here tonight that I found an old ad that Bubbles had made for the store, and a black cat was the kind of emblem for the company. And what she did is she drew these little boxes, and she put a kitten in each corner. One was hardware, one was paint, one was lumber, and so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I'll bring that over so you can all share it.
Great. Yeah, I do. I'm not done. Found my other page. Well, in 1873 was the first school. It was by the ferry landing, and it was a log school, log cabin. And then in 1895, William Eden donated 1 acre, what we know as the playground, for a school. And Adam, I know you know some things about William Eden. You want to just share those?
First, Janet, how many kids were in that first school? Do you know?
I don't know. When probably would, but, and, seeing some of the pictures of the schoolhouse, how, like, I counted one time there were like 30 kids. Like, it really varied from year to year. So, and then the school closed in 1962.
Don's wanting you to use the microphone.
Oh, okay. Adam?
Well, this isn't really about me. But, so the Gleeman Cemetery, I'm a cemetery commissioner, born and raised on Gleeman, etc. So, very quickly, it's Edens with an S at the end of the name. So it's Edens, it's not an apostrophe S, it's Edens. So the first Eden was, his name was John. I can do this briefly here. John was born in 1840 in Kentucky, and his dad was an old Whig, and John remembers as a child, this is in a book that I read, listening to Henry Clay, who was a great senator at that time, talk about patriotism and citizenship, so those are the things. So, John Edens and his brothers, they're part of the Civil War, and after the Civil War, they were mustered out, which means just kicked out, and John, age 27, he went home, 25, went home to check with his mom, and his dad had died, and at age 27, a couple years later, he decided to head west and strike it out on his own. So he went to Colorado for a bit, went to San Francisco for a bit, went to Portland and came up to Olympia, and he was looking for land. And so he talked to the governor. Washington was not a state at this time. He talked to the governor, and the governor said, well, you can't see anything from here. There's land that's available to the north. And so John Edens took a steamship, went up to Whatcom, which is present-day Bellingham, and along the way, who knows if the skipper of this boat had some sort of tie-in with some kickback or whatever, but he said there's land on Guimas. And so John went to Guimas and he had 160 acres. It's called preemptive, which means I'll do something with it later.
Here, walk over here with me and we can point. You point, you do Vanna.
So I don't know exactly how the property lands, but it was 160 acres that's called preemptive.
Yeah.
Hang on here,
which means
hang on
that-
here, hang on here.
Which means that
Want me to move over?
No, you're good.
he's going to do something with it eventually. 160 acres was homesteaded, 160 acres was for logging. And so you guys know that little farm on Edens Road that where it opens up after the playground and then heads over the hill? Well, that's 80 acres. So there's 160 times 3 of acreage on the island. So that's how the cemetery got to Guimas. John had a successful logging company for about 10 years and had sent word to his brothers to help him out with his logging company. And one of the brothers is William. And that's how you get Williams Cemetery. And that was in 1904 after he died. His widow sent a deed to the county to make that happen. It's okay, Eric.
Keep going.
So the other part of that is the schoolhouse. So that's why it's Eden Cemetery and this is Eden's Road. But it has to do with this first one that came out, which is John. So I could go on, but Eric tells me I can't.
Thank you, Adam, that was great.
So, yeah, I mean, Adam was explaining that to me earlier, just like how vast the whole thing is. And so the schoolhouse is here, of course, center of the island is now called Schoolhouse Park. But I'm going to hand it off to my dad now. The main thing I was noticing in Bud and Clive's story is Miss Miles, and then I think, Dad, I want you to at least mention Colonel Vonnegut.
You don't need to tell me what to
Well,
mention.
yeah, there you go.
I'm not going to forget Colonel Vonnegut. I'm the only one here who was fortunate enough to have Mr. Colonel Vonnegut, whose real name was Walter Vonnegut.
Not true.
But he was, am I not speaking loud enough?
There.
Okay, Walter Vonnegut, Colonel Vonnegut, he arrived about the same time as we did at the end of, we arrived in 1946 after the war. My folks were stationed on Whidbey Island, and after the war my father got a job teaching at the Anacortes High School, and we moved to Guimas. At the time, the way they got to Guimas was that somebody that was in the military with them over there at Whidbey Island had a piece of property that he was willing to sell to them for $2,500. It was 10 acres with a house and a barn, and so they bought it sight unseen. They didn't know where Guimas was. They didn't know anything. They figured out where it was, and my mother told me at one time, she said, well, when she first heard about Gleams, she thought it was Gleams, the land of my dreams. So they moved to Guimas, no power. My dad started teaching high school over there, and then I went to school in 1950, had 4 grades up there, and that's where I had Mr. Vonnegut, who was a World War II veteran himself, and had moved to Guimas just a little bit later than we did. And he was building a log house up, it was called the Tower House. Some know who it's still there up on Werner's property, and the new owners, I don't know who they are. But they lived in the Tower House, which is a lovely, had a tower because the water was up there, and then the bedrooms, it was a great place. But Walter was a colonel. He was a great teacher because we had so much fun with Mr. Vonnegut. Whether it was throwing snowballs, and it was not one thing Mrs. Miles would do. I learned about Mrs. Miles after Mr. Vonnegut left. But anyway, he was a great teacher. I have one thing that sticks out of my mind. It's just kind of a little situation. Is that first of all, I didn't get to go to school the first week because I had tonsillitis, and I had to have my tonsils out. So I was a week late arriving, so I was a little nervous. And I was kind of, there were 4 grades there, and it always seemed when you're if I started just kind of like Bud about a month. I was in September, Bud's in October. So I was young for my age, and then you go in there and there are these 4 grades, and these 4th graders just seemed like they were monsters. I think I weighed 50 pounds. So I was pretty impressed with this whole big system that was going on. And Mr. Vonnegut, he had a great time. He would just do things like put on the John Philip Sousa marches. And he was a World War II veteran, and he had been in marches. And he had marched in he was a prisoner of war at one point. But anyway, we had a lot of fun. But the one thing that's, other than just the way that he taught and the way that you all learned, it was just this one-room schoolhouse thing, which was really, they tried to go back and emulate that later, because you went at the speed you wanted, you worked with your classmates. That was, if you could go do faster, you did it. Well, I was kind of fortunate enough to be moving along at a pretty good rate, and Mrs. Miles came. I was in the 3rd grade, and she says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing mathematics in this book here. And she says, well, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're doing this. So she went back and had me do all the things I was doing over and over again, which I got out my report card I found in the closet, and it said I was a troublemaker. That's because she just couldn't keep me busy, but I guess some people think I still am. Nevertheless. But it was great up there. We just had a great time. So that's what I can remember. Well, I was going to tell this one little anecdote if I could, Harry.
You're good.
I hadn't been there very long, and I was meeting these new people. Of course, I knew the Ashbacks and the Vonnegut's, and we lived up in that Section Avenue area there. But I didn't know too many of these other people. But this one little kid whose name will go unannounced.
I don't want you to use the mic better.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, this one little fellow that is, we became friends, like we were just buddies kind of, and he says, I want you to go up to Mr. Vonnegut, and I want you to do this, and he showed me how to do the finger. And I had no idea about the finger. So I go up to Mr. Vonnegut, who I just loved, and flipped him off. And Mr. Vonnegut just grabbed me by the back of the neck and said, who told you to do that? I said, Billy. So that was pretty memorable. But I was pretty naive at 5, I'm sure.
One other quick one I want to sneak in here. Bud was mentioning to me before the event that there's also, can you hear me okay?
I'm not quite hearing.
Oh, that's too bad.
I got,
Well, the story's for you guys, not Bud.
I'm sorry.
So I'm just going to talk to Bud.
What I'm saying is, I wanted to remind everybody about that there was a kindergarten here.
Oh, yeah, and that's kind of an important point for me, is just like, so, and, I just want you to include that in the kind of system here, and so I'm going to go to care of this. But I just wanted to mention that there was a kindergarten here, literally in this building, and I guess Grandma Jane taught it.
Well, there wasn't when I was school.
Bud claims.
I was about 4 at that time.
Bud says.
So that, I
And
started
Steve
in
confirms.
kindergarten here.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Carol.
I didn't get kindergarten.
Oh.
What's cheating?
You skipped kindergarten?
Yeah, there
Yeah,
wasn't.
you need kindergarten.
I think the mothers are the ones who did the kindergarten.
Oh,
Not teachers, that's why. There wasn't just any parents willing to do that. So the beginning of my life was kind of rough. First of all, I wasn't supposed to be here, but my mom fought for me. A lot of people wanted me aborted, and so she refused to do that. So I'm here because she fought for me. But then I was born with a closed stomach and almost died because no food was going in my stomach and I was dropping weight. And then after that, about a year old, I was under the ladder. My mom was picking cherries over where Tom and I used to live, where my son lives. That was Uncle Charlie's. And the ladder fell on me, and my nose, I guess I was just gushing blood, so my dad picked me up, took me to the house, and left my mom hanging in the cherry tree. 6 months pregnant. With my sister, and she started in the labor. She was forced to stay in bed for the last 3 months of her pregnancy, and I was farmed out. I didn't know what happened. I couldn't see my parents. I got polio during that time. And then at 2, all my teeth were pulled out. Because the first tooth came in with no enamel. So my first grade picture is, I look like a 90-year-old woman with no teeth, no baby, I had molars and stuff. So then after that, I cut my leg very severely, 75% of, 3/4 into the muscle and tendon, so I was in a cast for. In fact, Wooten, see that my mom had no car. We lived up by the heliport, and she picked me up and started running for the ferry dock, and they were putting electricity on the island, and the guys heard my mom screaming, took me down and all of us down to the ferry dock and to the hospital. So I was in a cast for months and months and months. And I learned to draw because of that. That's where I started my art, was because I had nothing to do. I couldn't go anywhere. And so then after that, the tractor fell on my arm. It was just, and so what happened though, because of that, my mom was always afraid to lose me.
Just do this, the mic is better to talk into the mic like that.
Oh, sorry. Like that?
Thanks.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. So, anyway, so I was protected, and very much so. So my mom was just afraid to lose me. So when I got to school, I went a little wild. I had my freedom, I had my independence, and I got in trouble. But I ended up being top of the class, so I guess I was worth it. But my family started out with the Gibbons, not the Schultz. And the Gibbons were here first in the early 1900s, which was my grandmother's side. And they lived where Banjo lived, one of them, and Uncle Charlie was my grandma's brother who lived across the street from the Schultz farm. And let's see, and then there was Burles Gibbons who had the blueberry field, where the blueberries were. And a lot of others were related. Hattie Adams. So anyway, they were all, and Mac Law, they're all related. And there were a lot of them in the school. A lot of, kids from the Schultz family and Gibbons family. And so then my grandpa ran away from home in Michigan in 16. Was on the circuit for when they were doing wheat, he was a water boy. And then he found out that there was gold in Alaska. And went to Alaska, but the gold was gone. And came back to Seattle, and Uncle Charlie was logging with them. They were logging Seattle, the Seattle area. And he witnessed a lot of things, very important things. Anyway, so then Uncle Charlie told him to buy across the street, and it was just so my grandpa came here and met my grandma. That's where the Schultzes came. And my dad was the only boy. All of the rest are girls, so he was pretty spoiled. And he went to school up there till 9th grade. Then didn't like school, so he went to work. So that's basically the story of how we got here.
Thank you very much. One other quick one I wanted to mention, so Carol mentions that her dad went there as well, and I think you said that he went there through 8th grade, and it went through 8th grade at that time.
Right.
Were there times when it went through high school, through graduate, or through 12th grade?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, but not my dad's.
Yeah, well, I just talked to Bobby Kager here last week about that very issue, and he said that back when the Padawans down in South Beach they were the last class, there was a high school that went through 12 grades up there, so you had a Guinness Island High School certificate or diploma.
A Letterman's jacket.
What year was that?
I have seen the images of the basketball, there might be pictures in this hall of the basketball team that had the natives, there's several of them were natives and so forth, but that's all I really know.
Okay, thank you. So Steve, how are you?
So, my name is Steve Orsini, and we came to Guimas starting in the summer of 1952 from Alaska. My father ran a bank in Fairbanks, and but in the summers, he wanted to get us out of Fairbanks, which was very small at the time. And he read in the Sunset magazine, there was an article about Guimas Island, and a gentleman named Gordon Dunthorne owned what is now Seaway Hollow, and he had built a lovely home there, but he had also built a series of cabins. So we would come and rent a cabin from Gordon Dunthorne, and then our big outlet was to boat. My father liked to boat a lot. And then coming forward, the situation was such that when I was 5, my mother and my brother stayed on the island through the winters. And then in 1954, we bought the place where we still live on North Beach. But the school for me was, I was very keen to go to school. And at that time, my best friend was Ken Vonnegut. We lived fairly close in Seaway Hollow to the Vonnegut's. And so they said, it's time for you to go to school. And I thought, this is great, because I envisioned going to school at the Schoolhouse. But I was 5. And what they meant was that I was going to come to the hall for kindergarten. So I remember driving, Helen Vonnegut was driving, and we got up to the school, we turned left onto Guimas Island, and we went right by it. And I remember just breaking into tears that where were we going? That school. But so what was happening was that the mothers on the island were running a kindergarten here. So we started school in kindergarten, and then if you got through kindergarten, which I managed to do barely, then you went first through 3rd grades at that time at the Guimas Island Schoolhouse. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and then once you finished 3rd grade, you got to ride the bus. You matriculated and went to Anacortes, which was a pretty big deal at the time. But it was a very interesting. I only had Vera Miles, and I do remember Glenn Veal kept getting in trouble for a number of things. But and Mrs. Miles was quite strict. There were 3 grades, and you sat in 2 rows. So the 1st grade was 2 rows on the left, and then middle, and then the 3rd graders. And so she taught kind of sequentially up and down. But she also lived, there was a house across the Guimas Island Road. And she, when you took the job at that time, the teacher lived in that house on Guimas through the winter. And so she would be there early and get the school opened up. So Glenn was in trouble for a number of things, but one I really remember, I was in the 1st grade, he was in the 3rd, and she would organize softball for recess. And Glenn was a pretty good baseball player. He was one of the few who could hit the ball. This was in the back, and the outfield was towards Eden's Road. And Glenn could hit a home run that went over the road into the ditch. And after a while, Mrs. Miles wouldn't allow Glenn to do that. And, he got punished for hitting home runs that went over Eden's Road. So I was impressed, but she was pretty strict. But there were a number of memories about it, but I wanted to run this one by you because the people that lived on Weemis, it fluctuated. I think when I was there were like 18 kids between the 3 grades, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but there was a family on the island. Their last name was Fuge, and they lived in the house, which is, well, I'm just going to read this for you. At the time, this was winter 1955, the Fuge family lived on South Shore Drive at the corner where it turned sharply south to west. The house was ramshackle, 2-story, dark clapboard, weathered structure. Judging from the well-worn path to the outhouse, the main house did not appear to have running water. Quite a few Fuges lived in the house. There was a lot of kids in the family. The Fuges, the Fuge that was in my class, the 1st grade, or the 2nd grade at that moment, was Herbert Fuge. Herbert wore the same clothes to school each day. The supposition that there was no running water at the Fuge home was reinforced by the fact that Herbert always wore the exact same jeans and shirt. As fall turned to winter, the clothes became more soiled and his aroma more profound. Herbert sat in the desk right in front of me. For some reason, which I could not explain, the school bus always let us out on the west side of Guimas Island Road, with the bus door opening onto the roadside away from the school. We had to walk around the bus and cross Guimas Island Road to get onto the school grounds. The rains of that winter had set in with vengeance. It seemed to rain more in those days. Maybe that's just the way I remember. The ditches were full to the brim with cold water. One dark morning, Herbert, sleepy as usual, tripped on the top step and pitched out of the bus. And I was right behind him when this happened. He cleared the bus completely and went into the rainwater-full ditch head first. For a second, he was completely submerged, and he hit nothing but icy cold water. He came up spluttering and floundering. Several hands helped him out of the ditch, with Cliff Waggle, who was the bus driver, ushering us all into the school and telling Mrs. Miles that we had to dry Herbert out. So Mrs. Miles brought him into the only inside bathroom in the building. Most of the time we went to the outhouses, at least the students did, out back. She told him to get out of his clothes, wring them out in the sink, and gave him a bath towel to dry off. Once he was dry with wrung out clothes, he was to redress and return to class, even though a bit damp. There was a warm, I remember this as a wood stove, a light in the classroom, and Herbert was encouraged to stand by that until he dried out. By the end of first recess, he was dry enough to rejoin the class. The marvelous thing about Herbert's misfortune was when he took his seat in front of me, his rank, somewhat urinous odor was gone. This condition lasted almost a week before the Fuge flood slowly but inevitably returned. I thought at the time that it might be good if he managed a ditch plunge about every 2 weeks, but he never fell off the bus again.
I just had a memory when Steve was talking about when going to school and thought he was going to go to the Schoolhouse Park and took a left and was wildly surprised. I went to school at Anacortes Schools, and I remember it was like 2nd grade and I was going to Island View. And so I get on the bus at our house, ride the bus around Guimas, get off the bus at the ferry, ride the ferry over, wait for the bus on the far side, go to Island View. I'm sitting there, and so the teacher reports that day. I really think it's like 1st or 2nd grade, and the teacher says, we're going to do a field trip today. and the field trip is to Guimas Island. And so we then waited for the bus again, took the bus to the ferry, got on the ferry, went over across, and so at least I think we're gonna go to Guimas and like go to the beach or do something fun, like anything. We had to stay on the ferry. We never even got off the ferry. Rode the ferry back over, rode the bus back over, like school day, that was my commute. Yeah, so I think what I would like to do is Bill Van Black's been awesome, and he's created this slideshow, and so I just want to kind of like walk through a few slides, and we'll just do a little history lesson and some facts and data for a little while. And then I think after I do that, this will maybe take like 10 minutes, and then we can have cookies and mix around, and then we'll do round 2, and we'll wrap it up after that. So slideshow time. Thanks for Bill. So, yeah, here's our purpose tonight. So, an old picture. I didn't really do a talk track here.
That's David Ashback.
That's David Ashback, okay. And who's he standing with? Yeah, feel free to just holler out if you guys know things. I don't mind that. So it's David Ashback. Who's it with? Go ahead, just holler.
For those that don't know, that's
Yeah.
the water pump
Okay.
that used to sit out there on the slab. It's kind of out by the corner of the crossroads there. And I remember one of the things that, I couldn't remember whether you were good or whether you were bad, that you've got to go out and pump the water until it filled up the tank, and then it would squirt out the top. So that's what that is there. That's where we've got our water.
Who's the guy, you know, the adult in that picture?
No, I
Okay, I'm going to just rattle off these facts here. 1875, first schoolhouse built, vlogs, Mom mentioned this, 3/4 mile east of the ferry landing. 1885, new schoolhouse built at present site of Schoolhouse Park. 1895, William and Mary Edens donated 1 acre of land to the school district. Thanks, Adam, for some additional detail there. 1948, Guimas and Anacortes school districts consolidated. Grades 4 through 12 attend school in Anacortes. 1962, school closed. All students attend school in Anacortes. 1973, the schoolhouse is demolished. 1976 is the first school reunion. And in 2000, there's the second school reunion. So that's one. This is a picture, and Bill, I'm sure we can put these online or share them with people. So we'll send these out afterwards. We'll find a way to share the slides so you guys can click through. But this is schoolhouse property deed and recording. It looks like the date down here is 1888. It's just kind of an interesting artifact. Guimas Island School souvenir, 1897. Names of pupils on here. I see like there's a Molly Edens on there, Campbell, Fred Lewis. Is that Lewis Lane, Adam?
Yeah.
Probably. Okay, cool. Graduation date at Guimas Island School at around 1900. Now, this is not that building, right? This is the log house one that we're mentioning. Yeah.
Down by the store, where the store is.
Okay, neat. So just to read the caption here, about 26 people and 1 dog are on the wide wooden steps. This is likely the schoolhouse built by islanders in 1885. The first school built on Guimas was a log building constructed in 1873, about 0.7 miles from the present ferry dock. Its teacher was Laura O'Brien Murrow, the daughter of Guimas Island settler H.E. O'Brien.
Wow.
This school served the island's students until 1895 when William Edens donated an acre of land for Guimas School. And this is a record of teachers' contracts. I mean, just an interesting artifact. And by the way, so definitely another kind of thank you. Pat Ridgely Erickson created this fold-out black thing back there, the kind of trifold thing. So that's a lot of great work. And then there's other artifacts. And then don't forget the cookie artifact in a little bit. That's another good one. Guimas School class photo 1919. Just Evelyn Strom, I recognize the Strom name. A lot of Strom names on there. Rolf is another common Guimas name. Kingston. Guimas Island school children 1927 to 1929. 18 Guimas school children standing next to each other on grass in front of Guimas Schoolhouse.
between 27 and 29. The back row is Pineo, Slagle, Blackington, Williamson, Allen, back off. The front row is Strong, Strickland, Levesque, St. Andre, Padavon, McMillan, Dolph, Wilbert Wiggy, Dolph. Women's Science School, class of 1929, 1930. This photo of women's school children appears to have been taken on the east side of the schoolhouse, looking west, 1929, 1930, circa. Skip the names. Here is another photo of 20 Weymouth Island PTA members sitting on school steps in front of next to each other around 1930. Again, Pineo, Stromberg, Strickland, Sherman, Pineo, Kager. School days, Weymouth Island in 32. Weymouth School Dance Program, 1930s. That's pretty interesting. Was there any formal dress requirements or anything like that? Is there nothing like that? No. Well, you mentioned Steve's story. I think it's that nail pretty well. Yeah. Okay. Children in Dutch costume, including Gordon Lyle, Showalter, Earl Blackington, Kathleen Hayden, Bud Strong, Leonard Penter, Olive Strong, Alma Zahner, and Sean Williamson.
So I think those pictures are from here.
Oh, from the hall.
Yeah, so that's the window for the bathroom
Yeah.
on the bottom. So that's like
Okay.
here as a celebration.
Okay. Or checking in on. Well, so do we know, Steve? Or kind of Carol and Steve mentioned, or Bud and Steve mentioned that the kindergarten program was here. But it sounded like it was kind of a new thing. Like Dad said that it wasn't a thing. Yeah. So it wouldn't be the 30s. That this would not be the kindergarten. Right? Yeah. Student body of Weymouth Island School around 34, 35. Henry Hamill. I'll try to just rattle off last names. Hamill, Rolfe, Cochran, Strong, Wooten, Showalter, another Strong, Williamson, Merchant, Padavon, Strickland, Zahner, Penter, Blackington, Forrester, Dolph, Sherman, Forrester, Pineo, etc. Jim Kager. And by the way, Carol pointed out this is Marvin, I think, down here. And I won't say what his nickname was.
Right.
His nickname, I don't know if I'm not going to say that right now. She'll tell you.
Don't.
Where's Henry Hamill?
Where's Henry? Back row Henry. So I'm guessing he's one of the big tall kids.
I doubt it, he was little.
Okay.
No. Henry's a big guy.
Horace was little. Henry's big.
Oh, Henry, it's okay.
Yeah.
Student body of school, 34, 35 photo. And then Don, who did you say was hunkish?
Padavon.
Padavon, I guess Don says this is the big tall kid, I guess.
Hey, Eric,
Yes.
that one of the Padawan reminded me when I was talking to Bob Kager, who went there too, and the whole family, that the Padawans were the last ones to get the Weymouth Island High School diploma. Then after that, I think they had 12 grades up there at that point. So those tall boys were the Padawans. That's what.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The last
So
ones. So that was it.
that was our basketball star, hypothetically.
Well, I don't know, but
Yeah.
that was them, and that was the last time they had 12 grades.
What year was that?
In what year do you know the year that was? No.
Early 40s, maybe?
I guess that was on our first slide. It said when they chopped
Half
it.
years, yeah.
No, that's when this year is, but I think
No.
on the first slide, right, it says when they lopped it off to truncate
That had
it.
to be late.
So sorry, just another question. Isn't that this building?
It looks like it to me, for sure. But it says school district on it. Now, you said that they
It
had
had
a
to be-
basketball team. Does anybody know about sports in general? Did they play against Anacortes and stuff?
No, but there's a picture around of several of the team members were Native American.
Yeah.
It's on the
And
back
I think
wall.
they played in this hall,
Oh.
a couple of basketball hoops when I was a kid.
Oh, boy.
And they shot, I think, on both sides of the ball or something. They didn't play up at there was no gym up there at the
Yeah.
schoolhouse.
There was but you said there's kind of a playroom though,
Yeah.
like one part of it was a playroom.
There's
So
four.
like classroom, playroom, bathroom
Yeah.
was inside.
Yeah, there was one bathroom inside. So on the south end was the classroom, and that's where the rows of class seats were. And then the north end was a big playroom. There was no furniture or anything in there. And then there was, when I went there, there was one inside bathroom, but that was for the teacher.
For the clean toilets.
We went, when I was there were 3 outhouses
Okay.
that you had to go out to. None were very warm, as I remember.
So there are my Auntie Ag, which was Linda Porter's mom. My dad is to her right. Then 2 of my other aunts are right below that. So my dad was born in 26. So he looks about 10 there.
Where's Marv in the picture? What row are in it?
Okay. Here.
See the second one from the left? Yeah. The 3 over from the
Yeah.
teacher to the right.
Here, I'll go over.
Yeah, sorry. Watch your step. Do you want to tell everybody what your dad's nickname was? I don't want to say it. You can.
Chink.
I guess he had squinty eyes, so he was called Chink.
Like mom. So that's my Auntie Ag, right above the R. And there's my dad, second one over. And then my 2 aunts,
This is Marv.
Marvin, yeah. My Annie Millie and Annie Evadine. That's a Kager. That's a Kager. And the Wootens, of course, they're skeezy back there. Yeah, so.
Do we know the teacher's name?
There's a picture in a little bit that I think has like the teachers.
Yeah, there's, I can't remember the name.
Jacoby or something like
I don't know. Guimas School 8th grade graduates in 36. A group of 8th grade students are shown on graduation day in 1936. Olive Strong, Earl Cahill. Bud knew Earl pretty well. You know Earl pretty well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Are in the front row with Elaine Strickland and 2 unidentified students behind them. The location is unknown, but probably not at the school. Guimas School, I don't think so every picture's here. Could be.
I think the community style pictures were here.
Got it. Guimas School, 1960, front row. So this is more seemingly modern era. Then remind me when the school closed, 62? Okay, so like towards the end, and then Bud's younger brother, but not youngest sibling, David, went.
And that
And then-
picture was taken at the school. I remember, I'm in that picture. My sister.
Yeah, I see that.
My sister's.
So this is Bud's little brother in the bottom left giving somebody a noogie. Even noogies back then. So yeah, David Ashbeck, Radke, Bud Valquist, Raleigh Pack, Dee Dee Pack, Carrie Valquist, David Radke, Phyllis Schultz, Ted Benjesdorf. I didn't know that. Benjesdorf, okay. Carol Schultz, Gail Bone, Sue Radke, and Kathy Harris. 76 Guimas School reunion. Is that your error?
Yep.
Yeah. Left to right. So this is teachers at 1976 Guimas Island School reunion. And so we have left to right, we have Art Kager, plaid shirt with glasses, Walt Vonnegut, AHS teacher in '62. So does that mean, Dad, that Walter went and taught at the high school?
Yeah,
Okay.
Eventually, yeah, I think he did.
yeah.
Do you know what he taught?
Math.
Math?
Yeah, he was a navigator on B-17,
Okay.
so he was quite a proficient math teacher.
Nice. Keith Barrett, Henry Hamill, what? Front row is Lucille Byers, Edna Strom Kelly, Verna Scrimshire, and then, so we keep saying Miles, and do we have a picture of her at all?
Mrs. Miles.
Just too painful?
So just to verify a little bit, so the tall guy with the white hair that's in like that group, that border group, that's Walter Vaughn. Right. So like the guy behind him in the plaid shirt must be the Art Kager.
No,
Right. And then furthermore, like,
no.
I don't think that's.
No, the plaid shirt is Vonnegut.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I understand that. But I'm saying in the suit it says Henry Hamill. I'm not so sure.
They're saying that this is Henry Hamill in the
Yeah.
suit?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
it could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Where's Mrs.
Well,
Miles?
he's a
Mrs.
He's
Miles.
a brawny guy.
Yeah, no, we want to see Mrs. Miles.
Mrs. Miles probably never returned.
Yeah.
Based on the students she had to deal with.
Mrs. Miles, to be fair, she had asthma really, really bad. And so she would have an attack a lot and send us out to play until she got over it and then we come back in. So we
That's
didn't.
a great idea. Put the kids outside.
Good
Oh, I'm gonna
excuse.
have them back
I'm
now.
not even asking that.
So she was out a lot, so we had a lot of free playtime.
Here it comes again.
5 minutes will have it.
2000, William Center School reunion, which well attended. Just a couple, I'll just read the headlines here. The first school district serving Williams Island. Second headline here is from, and this is obviously the photo we used for the invite here. I don't know if obviously, but our posters show that photo. And that's thanks to Claudia and Tom Deach and whatnot for the rural heritage project that they've done, archiving all these old photos from Weymouth, and it's been amazing. They have a scanner and do all this archiving. It's really, really nice, and that's all available online. And then number 3 here is from This Isle of Weymouth, Anacortes newspaper clipping. So I'm not going to drain that slide. I'm going to get you guys into cookies and whatnot, water. And then there's the big guys. Open your wallets, just go crazy. So that's it. Anyway, no, I mean, I think just one quick comment on that is, so like I said, it's like there's a long history here of this group of the Historical Society, and again, just trying to so the 3 priorities, Bill and I have spoken about this, is DPP, and I'll have to do it solid, but it's to discover, preserve, and promote the history of Weymouth. So the preserve, and so Bud and I talked about different artifacts that he has, and so, you know, we want to be an institution on this island and a clearinghouse for knowledge and information, and ultimately the big goal here is to have a museum where these things can all be safe and saved and again archived and whatnot, and people like Claudia who are here tonight have done an amazing job of archiving what we do have, and it's a big project. It's pretty interesting, so I've been grateful to be a part of it. But yeah, and just I think main thing is just send people the cookies and we'll take a little break.
Well, I know. Well, I talked to Max Benchman 3 times recently and encouraged him to come. He declined. But Max, he has 4 children, and the only one that went to the women's school was Murray, the oldest. And he had Mrs. Miles, and Max thought Mrs. Miles was
Mrs.
great.
Snow.
Well, Max said Mrs.
No.
No, you told me Mrs. Snow.
Okay. Anyway, she left and had to take care of her mother. So another teacher came, and she was not good at all. She was just a horrible teacher. And so the parents got together, the school board came over to Guimas. This is 1962, and they, at that time, decided to close the school. And I said to Max, how did the district feel about that? He said they were happy to close it. So, anyway,
What year was that?
1962. So thank you all for coming.
Well, no, we're not, I don't think we're done by any means.
Okay.
So we're just trying to take a little intermission, like take a 10-minute break, stretch your legs, and we'll be
And
back.
get water and cookies.
Yeah, and we'll let these guys talk more, tell more stories and share more. Yeah, just a little.
Any questions?
I'll be interested.
I'm curious about the possibility, I hate these. I'm curious about the possibility of prejudice and biases between school kids of very different backgrounds, say between Caucasian and Native American in the same class. I grew up in a community of Italians and Polish people. And of course, there we were, I was a squarehead, they were Polacks and Wallachs. And we didn't think a lot about it. And we weren't prejudiced among those groups, but we treated welfare kids badly. So we had to think about welfare kids who were often poor and not well dressed and so on. I'm wondering what those dynamics were that you remember.
Well, let me try to answer that, because I've kind of thought about this. When we grew up on the island, I would say that economically, there weren't a lot of differences in people weren't very wealthy. Most people were, working class people and teachers, and so it's, I would say, quite a homogeneous economic group. There weren't any Native Americans in the school when I went there, and I do know that I never thought about people being wealthy or rich or snobby until I went to Anacortes. And then I learned that, at that time, a lot of kids called me, I was a Dog Islander. I was from Dog Island. And I didn't know the history of that term. I thought it was called Dog Island because a lot of people from Anacortes, when they got tired of their dogs, would bring them over to Guimas and let them go. So that's how but actually Dog Island goes way back to, the Swinomish had, Samish had a very unique white dog, which they harvested the hair from and made blankets, etc. So that's probably the true term of it. But I don't remember any real prejudices on Guimas at that time.
By the way, there's a wonderful presentation of Dog Island, the history of it, at a recent show at Mona, and we got permission to get that piece intact, and I think it should be in our collection. I hope.
I can say a little bit because my dad went to school with a lot of the Wootons and, Blackingtons, and was there any more? Blackingtons. And there wasn't any thought about, they're kind of even, Stephen. But he's right. When we went to Anacortes, we were thought of as, I don't know, Dog Islanders, but that was a very bad term. And there's a story about the Gilkeys who lived next door to us had a boxer and dog, and we had, they had the store by then, so there's a narrow space between the house and the store. And at that time, the dogs were running wild. They were pretty destructive. They were trying to kill the calves when they were born, and they were a big, huge pack of dogs on the island. And very dangerous to our animals. Well, on a particular day, Mrs. Gilkey B was attacked by one of the dogs, and her boxer saved her. Because it went for her throat, and the boxer saved her. So after that day, we were all told, if you want your dog safe, keep them indoors for, it was about a week, and then they planted poison meat
Ew.
out to kill all the wild dogs. again, they're just people who abandoned their pets here and had puppies and puppies and puppies. But when they tried to attack a human, that was the last straw. So.
All right, any other audience questions, or just curiosities, things you guys want to know? And feel free to just shout it out. Go ahead, what do you got?
Well, this is anecdotal, obviously, but Dad and Bud, I guess primarily maybe Steve knows too, but so what was the brand of the smokes that your parents liked?
Okay, so the question is about, I guess, the degree to which people smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, well, Dad and Bud can name off
Okay.
whose brand was whose.
So I'll ask Bud.
So the question is what brand of cigarettes did your parents smoke?
Oh, well, it was Raleigh's, because they saved the coupons.
Yeah.
Now, I think, Glenn, your father, wasn't he a Camel man?
Chesterfield.
Chesterfield, okay. Your father had, what was it? Camels? Okay, George. Clive's father, George, was a wonderful man. I want you to know that I worked for him. He was a very, very intelligent man. I can get emotional about this. George, I don't know if I mentioned that at the historical thing about 4 or 5 years ago, but George, during World War II, was really a bigwig at Goings. And Clive's father, George, was really in charge of building war bombers. Now, he had knowledge, and if you were draft age man in World War II, and you showed up every day with his father, you built airplanes for the war. But if you showed up drunk, you were in the military. George had that spot, and he was very instrumental in how we got out of that war with the aircraft. I want you to know that. George was a very, very intelligent man. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
A little bit?
But
Okay.
So that was a question about tobacco brands. Go ahead. He's got them all. Go ahead.
how many Georges were there on your way up from the ferry?
Well, there were 4 Georges between the ferry dock and right here.
Yeah.
There was George Kingston, there was George Pinio, there was George Humble, and my grandfather, George Ashbeck. And there were 4 of them between, like my grandfather, George Ashbeck, was the furthest north, and he just lived right across the street here. And of course, Clive, you asked about George Kingston. Clive was, when I was growing up, I'd go down and see Clive quite a bit, and he would bring out a radio. And I'd say, Clive, where'd you get that? And George Kingston gave it to me. It seemed like every time I got down, his father was very close with George Kingston. And it seemed like every time I got down there, this is my recollection, he had got something else from George Kingston. Wow! I got to move down there. Now, ultimately, I got to know George Kingston quite well in my time in college, because in the summer of 68, 69, and 70, I worked with George Kingston at the cannery. George had been a long-time foreman at the butchering room for the cannery at Whitney Fidalgo. And you remember, George knew, your father was good at smoking salmon too. Am I getting off stream? So I worked with George Kingston those summers when I wasn't salmon fishing on a boat. And George Kingston knew that I knew salmon because you know, I knew the difference between a humpy and a sockeye and a silver or a chum dog and a king or a blackmouth, and sometimes you'd get a steelhead that would even come in. So George, in the butchering, George put me on the sorting belt so I could, you know, organize the fish to the right category for the canning operation. And he was wonderful, George. He would tell me, but we can't can blackmouth, that's an immature king, and we can't can steelhead. So he would have me throw those in a tub of ice, and then at coffee break he'd say, but don't go in there and in that smoky room and have a cup. And he'd tell me how to cut the fish. And then we would bring it home, it was very good because he taught me a lot. But he wanted those blackmouth all put in bags of ice so that we would bring them home and smoke them. I was living on the island then. And he would always say, Bud, now we're gonna smoke those blackmouth, but be sure that you put in a couple big kings for us too. And it was just wonderful. And Clive, you were the neighbor, you growing up, he was most of the beneficiary of George Kingham's smoked salmon before I started working with George in those summers.
Well, we had the schoolhouse, so we brought it up and we smoked it.
Oh yeah. And your dad's smokehouse is still there. And his father knew how to smoke fish too. But I can tell you, we could have a whole symposium about George Humboldt and George Pinkston. They were very close friends. George Humboldt thought the world of George Pinkston. And he really was George Pinkston was a wonderful man. I can tell you all about it. Beyond that, but I don't want to take over the...
I'm going to give it to Steve, just because he has... Anyway.
Well, I just wanted to talk just quickly about Walter Vonnegut, who was, Walter Vonnegut's cousin is Kurt Vonnegut Jr., the novelist. And Walter came here after the Second World War, but he was a navigator on a B-17, and they were shot down over Germany, I think about 1942. And he was able to get clear of the plane and survived, but as soon as he landed and was trying to hide his parachute, a German farmer came up with a Luger and put it to his head. And so Colonel Vonnegut spent the rest of the war in prison. And then they came here, they were very community-oriented, and then they ultimately moved to Anacortes, but Colonel Vonnegut's mother back in Indiana was quite the actress. And so he taught for a number of years math in the Anacortes School District, but then went back to University of Washington and became, he got a master's in theater and came and started the Anacortes Theater, which is now called ACT. So that was another Walter Vonnegut project. They were quite interesting people.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you can remember when television arrived on the island, and if that affected your school experience, your education in any way.
That's for Dad. That's a good question. Anybody
Oh.
want to take that?
I have,
TV and radio, I guess, just technology and what it was like. But TV's a good question.
well, yeah, my dad loved TV. I mean, we had to watch every station of news, but in the second grade, I was misbehaving a lot. Well, they found out a lot of that was because my mom discovered I was watching TV just 6 inches away from the TV, and she couldn't understand why. It was because I was extremely nearsighted. And part of my problem in school was that I couldn't see, and I couldn't Yeah, so there was TV, we did have TV, I was in second grade. So I know that, but yeah, we had to have a TV, we didn't have anything else.
Back on TV, I think we were some of the last people to get TV, because I know that the Benjestorps had TV. We used to go down and watch it, and all I can remember early on was the hearings of McCarthy.
Oh, gee.
McCarthy hearings were on the TV, whatever year that was.
What did Thelma smoke?
What?
What did Thelma smoke?
Paul Malls.
Yeah.
She and Bob both smoked Paul Malls. All those World War II veterans, you know, they got them on those cigarettes and they can never get off.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
I have a personal note on this one. When I was growing up here, we had channels mainly 2, 4, 5, 6 kind of, 8, 12, and 10 kind of 12. That was it. And
13?
I don't feel like we got 13. Not that
We
I
got
know.
Canadian 12.
But so the way that I tell people is that about half those were Canadian channels, and I'm kind of
Mr. Dresser.
half Canadian, yeah, because of that.
There was hockey night in Canada. We got on North Beach just two channels, 2 and 8. And every Saturday night was hockey night in Canada. You had to watch that. So.
She also got the Goon Show.
No, that was in Alaska. We got the Goon Show on the radio in Alaska.
Brantley's had an early TV on the island. Do you remember that one?
No, I didn't remember.
Olin and Ruth had a TV early on. Yeah.
We heard a pretty good one earlier this week from Tom Wooten. Maybe it was Tasha Dunn's Pat Dunn at this event we attended earlier, and he had the question. It was old timers that it was kind of like before power, I think, that they were listening to the radio and all this, and you didn't understand how they were doing it, and the person responded by saying, "We have batteries."
Oh, yes.
It's like kind of like, you idiot.
When did you get that?
Power 48?
49.
49.
So I think that would be a good topic for the Historical Society. The early people who were earliest,
Settlers.
yeah, settlers, like my granddad came to Anacortes to join his brother in a shoe store, and many of the businessmen bought 50-foot lots on Weymouth Island for $50. I mean, it was, everybody did. I mean, that's why we're here, that's why we just went away. But that'd be fun.
Well, you know, this whole area between the
All right,
South Shore Road and Edens Road out there, that whole area was platted North Anacortes. We have seen
Oh, right.
the maps. In fact, that's how at the playground there, when we got the playground back from the school district, we were able to use these North Anacortes plats to deed the county, or at least give the county the property that's mowed up there. Because it was all this whole property, not including Humboldt here, but next to it, the phone property, eventually, there's several owners, but that was all North Anacortes, just little small,
Yeah, I remember
but they were all
that.
identified.
Yeah.
Dad, can you maybe just like rattle off the quick, I guess what's interesting to me is like, I think you have some quick ones on when it closed or that it closed, and then it probably sat dilapidating for a while. Did it sit there and kind of, the school itself? And then, so the question is just about the property and bringing it up to present day, roughly speaking.
Right. Well, after the school closed, it just sat there for a long time, and then several of us came back from college, and after we just got married and moved here, and started being involved in the community, and we realized that the school was just sitting there, and we thought, well, maybe we could fix it up, and so we got some paint, and we were going to go fix it up, but then the school board didn't want to do that because they didn't see in the future, and then we realized it was too far gone to fix up. We had no money, and so the next thing we heard was that they were going to sell it, and that we heard that many of you don't know this person. He was a deckhand on the ferry, Mick Allen. Mick Allen was going to buy this property, and he wanted to put in a service station in a 7-Eleven type. You know, back then there was no 7, but that's what he wanted to do. So those of us who have been trying to preserve it decided that that was not going to work out very well because we didn't see that was the future. And fortunately, I was able to, Mrs. Kager was alive at the time, and she was in her 90s, I'm sure. But she went over to her, and I explained to her what was going on, and she said, oh, I knew this Edens personally, and she was there when he gave the property to the community for a school and for public use. And so I had her write up an affidavit about what Mr. Edens had said, and Steve Paz and I went over to both of the board meeting, and they sold it to us for $1, we thought. But then Eric has provided me information recently. We only got a 50-year lease, which is expiring next year. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think they're going to take it back. But you know, it was one of those things where we made the proper move, because I think otherwise you'd see a gas station there right now.
One thing about looking on Wemos and being in school, and Eric kind of pointed that out, that you know, you had to catch the bus, wait for the ferry, get on the ferry, either walking or sometimes the bus would go over. But a very unique problem with girls walking across on the ferry, especially on Almar, because we had to climb up those big steps, was that we had to wear dresses. We could not wear pants. And it was so hard to go up that with your books and holding your dress down so it wasn't up over your head. That was really hard.
One thing I remember from the schoolhouse days was that every Christmas, Mrs. Miles would order us to do a play, and it was always the same. It was the Christmas story, and we all got different parts, and we all had to memorize these parts, and then you know, everybody showed up at the school, and we had these little strange costumes on. And we would go through the Christmas story, and invariably one or the other of us would remember all of our lines, and we would get kind of in trouble, right? She would stop the production and say, you see, this is what happens when Steve Orsini doesn't remember his lines and he hasn't studied them. So that was another. Mrs. Miles was kind of strict, is that?
Were there any people who complained about having to do the Christmas story? Because
No, I mean, this was the 50s, you know, there wasn't the concept of another religion other than Christianity. I mean, but we were Catholic, which was, that was a problem, but yeah, that there was no religious awareness, I would say.
Yeah, that's real good, sorry. Kevin, did you have one, or Julie?
Glenn, was there at some point with the 3 stores at one time on the island at the same time?
I believe so. If you counted, well, there was one down right there at the end of the road. That was
Woodfield.
Woodfield. I want to say Woodbury. Woodfields. They had a store. The Woodfields had a store, and then there was one at the Eaton's Road, and where Eddie's. That was a strong place at one time. There was one there, and then there was one on North Beach.
The Brados.
The Brados.
Yeah. What about?
And then there was the store
the
down
resort.
at the resort.
Oh, yeah, down at Charlie's.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Another school-related issue.
Yes, that's right.
I remember rituals for that post-school time from about 4 to 6 o'clock every day. And as a historian, I'm always curious about cultural differences and similarities. And around this issue on schools, for me, it's how was East Coast, where I grew up, different from out here? In the summertime, for us, it was climbing the neighborhood apple trees, making forts, and just raising mayhem. In the wintertime, it was a very clear ritual, crouching from 4 to 6 in front of the big upright Philco radio, listening to Tom Mix, The Lone Ranger, Ozzie and Harriet, The Shadow, and so on. What occupied you were those? And I realized I'm in that decade just before the area we were talking about. Is there any similarity? Were any of those things common out here?
Well, what I remember in the winter here, well, you know, what I remember is that the school bus came and picked us. We all got out of school. We all went at the same time. In the morning, we all got out at the same time. And one of the things I remember is that when we had, it seemed we had colder winters, but we had this, every now and then, in the winter, some of the ponds would freeze over. And we would get together, usually it was getting darker at night, and I don't think any of us owned skates, but we made hockey sticks out of lumber, some from Glenn's place, and then I had one puck that my brothers had brought from Canada, and we would get together and we would play hockey on the frozen ponds, and it was the weirdest kind of, I mean, it was devastating. I can remember Arn hitting Glenn in the shins. He never even came close to the ice or the puck. It was pretty wild. But we would get together sometimes and play football, and there was a bit of baseball on the island. So
So after school sports, pickup.
that was after school sports. It was pretty pickup.
And the ice never broke?
Well, you know, we were fortunate enough that we waited long enough that we didn't have too much problem with the ice breaking. But yeah, there were moments when you suddenly heard these zinging shots as the ice was splitting and then the game was over.
I'm going to point out a little different area because I was a farmer, and your mom, I loved her for saying this. We had to work the farms, the gardens and all the farms, so we didn't get to associate much with the North Beach people because, and there was a cultural thing. That we had work to do, and they came here to play. And so we rarely mixed. I know my sister and you, Jennifer, were good friends, Jenny. And so, anyway, but...
We were friendly, but you were busy.
Right.
You were busy.
We were busy. We didn't, that was not our playtime. That was our work time, the summers.
Yeah.
But your mom said, she says, if I think about it, we were really selfish. She said, and she said it's because we came here to spend the summers, and they concentrated on the family and having fun and being with the family, and all of us were working, so there wasn't there was the North Beach people, and there was different cultures kind of within the community.
Just like there is now.
For a piece of context, I think it was about 49 or 50 that the TV came in over the radio. And that kind of replaced the radio. So I'm in that generation that after school we listened to the radio if we listened to anything. And first year of high school was the first year, 49 or 50, so we got TV. And then what we did with our time with the media was totally different. We kind of didn't watch the whole major the word was at some of them.
We didn't even have power.
I'm wondering if the radio played much of an important part of your life.
No, not really, not Southeast. I don't know.
Well, we did. My parents were divorced in about '54, and my mother was a nurse, and she worked ultimately at Northern State Hospital for 16 years, so she was gone most of the time. And we didn't get. I remember when we got TV, that was the Nixon-Kennedy debate, and we must have been amongst the last to get TV on. radio was a very big part of our lives. We listened to radio a lot. That we inherited from Alaska. There was a lot of British broadcasting programs that were on in Fairbanks, and then we followed radio. So that was the biggest thing that we had. That and comic books were terribly important.
Yeah, comic books. Oh, jeez.
One other thing
I'm sorry.
kind of divided us was our money. I mean, you know, we were very poor, and North Beach was, according to us, rich. We couldn't understand how someone could actually have 2 houses, and their house here was bigger than my house that I grew up in. So, you know, it was, there was a little bit of division, but not on purpose. It just happened. Nobody disliked anybody. They just had different values, I guess.
Okay, it was 9, oh, you got one, here we go.
I just had a question going back to the school, because I heard one of you speak about that there were 3 classes and there were 2 rows of each of those. I thought it was, so I guess looking for some clarity about the number of grades at any one time. Maybe it's not a simple answer, but trying to understand.
So I think the
I think
question
that
is like the methodology overall, or like how did the one-room schoolhouse work, kind of, is that's my question. Is that?
I went for 4 grades up there, so I know Steve said there were only 3 when I got there, yeah. But I don't know how I ended up with 4.
You had to
Very
be.
good.
I had 4 too, because you were in trouble all the time.
Well,
But if it went through
No,
yeah.
it went to 4th grade because,
it went to 4th grade.
because I had Mrs. Van Ornum in 5th grade, and she helped me acclimate to the big city.
So that's another teacher that was up there, Mrs. Van Son?
No,
Yeah, of course.
her son taught up there years before. No, she helped me, because it was very hard to go from Weemus to over there for some. We didn't know anybody, we were shy, we were isolated over here, we couldn't attend a lot of the school stuff. So actually, you know, it was very difficult. My sister couldn't handle it and ended up doing 4th grade again because she moved in 62. But, yeah, it was, so she helped me by introducing me to groups to take me, she actually took my hand and took me over and, can you teach her how to jump rope? Can you teach her how to skip, you know,
Hopscotch.
and otherwise, I don't know if I would have been able to get through it. It was just very difficult.
Well, to answer your question, at least when I went there, it was, there were 3 grades at that time. And after the 3rd grade, you went to Anacortes on the bus. But the structure, and I think I remember this pretty clearly. So there was, and there were different desk sizes. The 1st graders, as you went in and you were facing south, were the first 2 rows on the left. And then in the middle were the 2nd graders. And then the 3rd graders had much bigger desks. And they were 2 rows on the right. And Mrs. Miles would move from, you know, from grade to grade and give assignments as she went, so that when she was done with the 1st graders, then they got an assignment, they had to work on something, and she moved on, and that, I remember her teaching that way. The other thing that's really humbling is that I do remember, Bud, when you went in, up on the top, there was a huge blackboard across one end of the classes that you faced, the wall that you faced, and it was had the letters of the alphabet in block letters and also in cursive. Cursive is no longer taught in the Anacortes school districts. Cursive is gone. So anyway, another thing that makes you feel old.
Okay, well, wait, got one.
Hi, Tom Staff. Just wanted to clear, 1952 was when the schoolhouse was taken down, is that right? I was born in '52, and so my recollection of the schoolhouse is driving by it dozens and dozens of times on the way to North Beach. And I remember riding bikes around the schoolhouse. Was there a cement pad that went around part of the school or around the entire school?
Not that I remember, there was a cement pad where the pump was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the back, there was a merry-go-round, some swings,
Yeah, yeah.
shed, and outhouses, and a slide.
Yeah, I remember the pump because that was a great curiosity for a 10-year-old kid. And yeah, not remembering exactly when it disappeared, but what a great thing to be able to remember that school. Having never gone there, it was still kind of a terror to us because growing up under 10 years old, the things that I recall that were really terrible were, of course, nuclear holocaust, and the other thing was being taken out of our school and being sent to the school on Guaymas Island. It never happened, but yeah, it was just, I don't think Mom and Dad ever would have done that, but they,
It was a possibility.
it was just a possibility.
A threat?
And
My favorite part of the school was there were some cubbies. Remember those little,
thanks for your
all along the window side on the west? And that's where all my art was. And so that was my favorite part, was that cubby had all my crayons and
Your art supplies.
yeah, because that's all I really wanted to do was art. So, but I remember I was, you remember Pete Bone?
Oh, yeah.
Well, his daughter Gail, do you remember her? She was my best friend. And beautiful, most beautiful girl I've ever met. And she, in third grade, I think it was, I had a crush on Ken Vonnegut.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so I was in third grade. I think I started getting some real teeth by then. So I didn't feel so self-conscious. But Gail Ballin was a little naughty. And we were swinging on swings, and the swings were really high. I mean, you'd go like 10 foot off the ground when you got it going really good. Well, she waited and got me up. We were both on that swing, and she started yelling, "Kara loves Ken! Kara loves Ken!" And it was so embarrassing, and I couldn't stop her. I couldn't run away. That was kind of the most embarrassing moment.
Did the swings disappear the next day?
What?
Did the swings disappear the next day?
You know, probably. I was hoping they would.
Well, let's give these guys a round of applause. So thanks for everybody for coming tonight. We'll get Clive home on the 9:15, I suppose. I don't know what that is, but I'm paying attention to the fair time, like always, I guess, right? So, but yeah, thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for showing up, and thanks for supporting the Guaymas Island Historical Society and Memory